Welcome to the introduction to No Limit Deuce to 7 Single Draw in 10 minutes or less, brought to you by RecPoker. So what is No Limit Deuce to 7 Single Draw? Well, it has blinds similar to No Limit Hold'em, a big blind and a small blind. It's often played with antes as well. It's no limit, meaning you can bet anywhere from the big blind to the size of your entire stack. It's 5-card draw. So there are no community cards, there's no board. All of the cards are held in each player's hand. Each player has 5 cards that they are dealt, and no one else can see those 5 cards. And it's single draw, meaning that there's exactly one drawing round. And it's typically played 6 to 8 handed. You can't play with more players than that because you may end up running out of cards when everyone draws. It's also a low ball game. That means that the worst hand wins. So for all of you people who complain that you never get good hands, this is the game for you because it's all about making the worst possible hand. And straights and flushes do count against you in this low ball game. That means you want to avoid the flushes and avoid the straights. Aces are also always played as high, except for the ace to 5 straight, when the ace will be low in that particular case. So let's go through an example hand. So we start off with the blinds. Jim has a 100 chip blind and Rob has a 200 chip blind as the big blind. And Steve is first to act with a Jack 7 4 3 deuce as his hand. Not a bad starting hand. So Steve's going to go ahead and raise to 600. Phil decides to fold. Kristen also decides to fold. John decides to call the 600. Jim folds, giving up his small blind. And Rob calls for the discounted price of his big blind. Then the dealer, of course, gathers all of the bets into the pot, and we move on to the drawing round. Drawing starts immediately after the button. So if Jim had cards, Jim would be the first one to start drawing. But since Jim doesn't, Rob will act first. So Rob decides to throw away 1 card and gets 1 replacement card. Steve is going to get rid of that Jack, and he ends up drawing an 8 instead, making quite a nice hand. And John is going to get rid of 2 cards, and the dealer will replace those 2 cards. Now we go on to the final betting round. Again, action starts after the button. So Rob will be first and checks. Then Steve decides to bet 1100. John calls the 1100, and Rob decides to fold at that point. Now we go down to the showdown. Steve tables his cards. John decides to muck his hand because he doesn't have a winner, and Steve rakes down the pot. Simple enough. The best possible hand is 7 5 4 3 deuce of 2 suits or more so that you don't have a flush. The second best, and then come the rest of the 7 high hands. The second best being 7 6 4 3 deuce, 7 6 5 3 deuce, and 7 6 5 4 deuce. Now you notice we can't add 1 more 7 hand in there because if we were to replace this deuce, the last deuce, with a 3, that would make a straight. And straights count against you in this game, so that would be quite a bad hand to have in this game. So instead, the next hand, we have to move up to some of the 8s. And the 5th best hand is 8 5 4 3 deuce. And the hand rankings keep on going like that. Then you end up with your 9 high hands, 10 high hands, Jack high hands, so forth and so on, until you start adding in the pairs, 2 pairs, 3 of a kind, straights, so forth. Typically, you're not going to end up playing a hand at showdown that is much worse than a pair. Sometimes you'll draw and hit a straight, or you'll draw, maybe hit a flush, although if possible, you try not to draw with the possibility of a flush. But typically, the worst hands you'll see are pairs. Now let's go through the hand strengths. So 7 high hands are awesome. There are 4 of those from 7-5 to 7-6. 4 different hands that make up your 7 highs. There are 14 8 high hands, 34 9 high hands, 69 10 high hands, and then 125 jack high hands, and then 209 queen high hands. And I'm not even going to count the king high hands. So as you can see, the 7 and 8 high hands are really your premium hands. Those tend to be the best hand when you make them. It's not impossible for the second best hand to get beat by the best hand, but it's fairly unlikely. When you start getting up into the 9 high hands, 9s often win, but you get a little bit riskier, particularly with the higher 9s. Your better 9s are, of course, better. And kings and queens are typically only good if your opponent paired their draw. That will not typically win a hand if very many people are playing. Of course, this is all very player dependent. I'm just trying to give you a rough idea of how strong the various hands are. This sounds fun to you? Join us in our RecPoker home game. We played No Limit Hold'em the first Wednesday of the month at 8 p.m. Central Time, and mixed games on the second Wednesday of the month, also at 8 p.m. Central Time. Check out rec.poker for more information.